Like a lot of things, it started during the pandemic. The Dawoods were a wealthy British-Pakistani family. Shahzada was vice chairman of one of Pakistan's largest corporations, and they had a long history of unusual travel. They'd been to Antarctica. They'd been to Greenland. So when Christine Dawood saw an ad for a tourist dive to the Titanic in 2020,
This is not a thrill ride for tourists. It's much more. It is an 8-day, one-of-a-kind experience.
she did what they always did. She booked it. 2 seats, $500,000. Her and her husband. The pandemic delayed the trip. 2 years passed. By the time the company called back to confirm the dive was happening, in late 2022, Christine had a different idea. Her son had grown up obsessed with the Titanic. He had once spent 2 weeks of his life building a Lego model of the ship, over 9,000 bricks. His mother kept it, so Christine gave Suleman her seat. She has explained this publicly more than once. In her first television interview with the BBC in June of 2023, she put it like this, quote, "It was supposed to be Shahzada and I going down. And then I stepped back and gave my place to Suleman because he really wanted to go." The submarine was built by an American company called OceanGate. Its CEO, Stockton Rush, was a charming man who convinced his customers that the Titan was the only vessel of its kind on Earth. A carbon fiber pressure hull, he said, that would democratize the deep ocean. What he did not tell them was nearly everything else. In March 2018, a Boeing engineer who had been hired to consult on the hull's structural design emailed Rush directly. Attached to the email was a chart projecting how much pressure the carbon fiber hull could absorb at depth. Just past 4,000 meters, he had drawn a skull and crossbones. The wreck of the Titanic sits at 3,800 meters. There was effectively no safety margin. Boeing walked away from the project. NASA walked away. The University of Washington's pressure testing lab walked away. That same year, OceanGate's own director of marine operations, a submersible veteran, wrote a safety report flagging 26 critical defects in the Titan's hull. He was fired one day after submitting it. OceanGate then sued him into silence. He testified about all of it under oath at a U.S. Coast Guard hearing in September 2024. Quote, "I had no confidence whatsoever." He called the Titan, in his own words, an abomination of a sub. He said OceanGate was willing to play Russian roulette. He wasn't alone. The Coast Guard's final report, released in August 2025, documented that several of OceanGate's own senior staff, the director of engineering, the chief pilot, and the director of marine operations, had told Rush flatly that they would never get inside the Titan themselves. Rush ignored all of them. The Titan's first full-scale hull cracked during pressure testing, well short of Titanic depth. OceanGate quietly built a replacement and never disclosed the failure publicly. The replacement hull, the one Suleman would eventually sit inside, reused titanium domes, sealants, and acrylic windows from the failed first version. In July of 2022, on a dive labeled Dive 80, the Titan made a loud bang as it ascended. OceanGate told the passengers it was the sub settling into its platform. The Coast Guard's final report concluded it was the carbon fiber hull beginning to delaminate from the inside. The NTSB later said the Titan should have been pulled from service that day. It wasn't. That winter, OceanGate left the Titan uncovered in a parking lot in Newfoundland, Canada, exposed to the sub-zero temperatures that engineers had warned would crack the carbon fibers further. The Dawoods would board that same hull a few months later. And on the morning of June 18th, 2023, Father's Day weekend, Christine watched her husband and son climb into the Titan. Her 17-year-old daughter was on the ship with her. In her BBC interview, she described the goodbye simply. They hugged. They joked. Shahzada was, in her words, like a little child. Suleman had brought his Rubik's Cube. He could solve it in 12 seconds, and he had applied to Guinness World Records to set the deepest depth solve in history. 1 hour and 33 minutes after the Titan began its descent, communications cut out. The OceanGate crew told Christine it was normal. The Titan would surface as scheduled at 3 p.m. It did not surface at 3 p.m. At 6:30 that evening, the mission director called a meeting and announced that the Titan was officially missing. Christine has said she didn't, in the moment, fully understand what she was being told. Quote, "I didn't comprehend at that moment what it meant, and then it just went downhill from there." What followed was the 4-day search and rescue operation that the world watched in real time. Hydrophones from a U.S. Navy listening system had already, on the day of the dive, picked up an acoustic signature consistent with an implosion. They were almost certain by day 1 They were obligated to keep searching anyway. Up on the Polar Prince, the OceanGate crew tried to keep the people occupied. There were jam sessions. There were poker games. They scheduled a screening of the comedy Wayne's World. In an interview with The Guardian later, Christine described what it felt like to walk into the screening. Quote, "Watching Wayne's World while they are trapped in the dark did not sit well with me." She didn't stay for the movie. 2 years after the implosion, the U.S. Coast Guard's Marine Board of Investigation released a 335-page report into what had happened. Its conclusion was a single word: preventable. The report identified 8 primary causal factors and 17 safety recommendations. It cited OceanGate's toxic workplace culture. It found that Stockton Rush had used intimidation tactics and exploited regulatory loopholes to keep the Titan operating with no oversight from any maritime authority on Earth. It found that he had reclassified his paying customers as mission specialists, not passengers, specifically to dodge U.S. Coast Guard inspection requirements. The investigators concluded that if Rush had survived the dive, they would have referred him to the Department of Justice for criminal prosecution. He didn't survive. He was on the Titan when it imploded. There is no one left to prosecute. 9 months after the implosion, what the Coast Guard had been able to recover of Shahzada and Suleman was returned to Christine. The DNA-tested remains arrived in 2 boxes. She has described them, in her own words, as the size of shoe boxes. What Christine has done in the after is its own kind of work. She listened when a Coast Guard officer told her hindsight wouldn't help, and she hasn't gone back to the moment she gave Suleman her seat. Hating Stockton Rush is a road she refuses to take. She has stayed close to Shahzada's family in Pakistan. They lost them too, and none of them grieve alone. When news from the investigation gets too heavy, she still grows wings and flies above it, taking only what she can carry. Grief gets her scheduled attention. She goes into Suleman's room when it asks for her, then puts it away again until next time. And she is building something out of it. A grief and trauma center, and a book called 96 Hours, out in May 2026. See description for more details. She didn't get to choose what happened to her family, but she is choosing, every day, what to do with what's left.